How do many people react when they see corruption and injustice? They become incensed, and they want to fix the problem. How do they try to fix the problem? By becoming involved in political efforts or social movements that claim to fight corruption and injustice. In contrast, why do Jehovah's Witnesses not get involved in political efforts or social movements? The simple answer: because they've learned from God's Word that the problems of this world cannot be corrected. Ecclesiastes 1:15 says, "What is crooked cannot be made straight." Satan's world around us is like the trunk of a tree that has grown so crooked, twisted, gnarled, it cannot be made straight. Jehovah's Witnesses have learned it would be futile to spend our time and energy trying to correct what Jehovah tells us cannot be corrected. We can never correct the corruption and injustice of this world by means of political efforts or social movements. That reminds me of the illustration a brother used about trying to get rid of a problem with spider webs, but being unable to get rid of the spider. You knock the webs down. Spider builds them right back. Knock them down, builds them back. You never get rid of the problem. Well, in this illustration, Satan is the spider. And since he's the source of corruption and injustice, as long as he exists, the problem will exist. And little puny humans can't get rid of Satan. He's superhuman. So the solution must also be superhuman. And that's where God's kingdom comes in. God's kingdom can and will not only get rid of the webs, but the old spider Satan himself, too.
Yes, the old spider Satan. How we long to see the back of him and his many webs. It just goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, doesn't it? And this is supposed to be part of God's channel with mankind. Out of everyone on the planet right now, nearly 8 billion people, if you were to narrow it down to the 8 most wise and most humble and most discreet individuals, you've just been watching one of them, folks. Stephen Lett is part of that extremely exclusive elite group of wise people that Jehovah has handpicked to give his wisdom to mankind. And in this instance, his wisdom is to be indifferent to the world's problems. Be indifferent when it comes to social justice and the environment. We've already seen this in this very convention. In fact, the sushi, if you're interested, is sushi 365. Jehovah's Witnesses pressured to be indifferent to environment and social justice. They went to the trouble of producing a propaganda video segment on this very subject. Again, I can't understand why this convention, well, I do understand why this convention has so much repetition in it. And they just keep going over the same material again and again and again. It's because there's absolutely zero divine guidance or influence in the way this half-baked convention has been cobbled together. I'm actually going to call it now. This is not the worst convention ever. It was looking that way on the Friday and arguably the Saturday morning. There was some truly horrendous material, but it's sort of flipped a little bit to the point where I'm kind of grateful that some of this material is being shown because it's making my case for me. I mean, thank you, Stephen Lett, for just being silly on camera and saying things that are utterly tone deaf. Of course, social justice is worth fighting for. This is an organization that has benefited from past generations fighting for equality. The civil rights movement had an impact on the Jehovah's Witness organization, because even in kingdom halls of Jehovah's Witnesses, there was segregation. There was segregation, if you're interested, when the photodrama of creation was being shown at least one theatre in New York, to the point where people were writing in and complaining, and Charles Taze Russell was having to make excuses for the fact that black people were being forced to sit in the gallery and white people got to sit on the bottom floor of the auditorium. It's been a part of the organization's history, racism and racial inequality. Nowadays, the organization, you could say, is conspicuously non-racist, apart from the lack of diversity on the governing body and among the governing body helpers. But certainly when it comes to attracting new members and when it comes to the congregation level, arguably there isn't any racism, or at least the organization projects a very progressive, inclusive message as far as race is concerned in its propaganda materials, in its illustrations, which very prominently feature people of colour. But it hasn't always been that way. And the organization has been forced to adapt, forced to change, forced to get rid of segregation because of the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement would not have happened if people in the past had taken advice such as the drivel we've just heard from Stephen Lett seriously.